From the Dominion Post in Morgantown, West Virginia, this is the Postcast, the audio companion to the Dominion Post newspaper. In this episode, a cyclist is killed outside of Brewston Mills, and we have a full rundown of Tuesday's Morgantown City Council meeting, including a discussion of the new cannabis ordinance that just passed. I'm your host, Chris Schultz, and these are the week's top stories. On Monday, a man cycling along Old Route 73 outside of Brewston Mills was struck by a car. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver of the car admits to using her phone at the time of the collision. I'm joined now via telephone by Dominion Post regional editor Kathy Plum. Kathy, thank you so much for calling in today.
Glad to be here.
Kathy, this incident occurred on Monday. What do we know about what happened at this time?
According to the criminal complaint by the investigating officer, who's a state trooper, a young man named Robin Ames, 37, of Brewston Mills, was riding a bicycle west on West Virginia 73, which is also called Old Route 73, runs parallel to Interstate 68, when he was struck by a Chevrolet Equinox, which is an SUV, driven by Tara Evans of Brewston Mills as well, and she has been charged in his death.
Can you tell us anything else about the situation, what exactly was going on at the time of the collision?
According to the criminal complaint filed by the officer, Ms. Evans said after the accident that she was on her cell phone and did not even realize that Mr. Ames was there until she felt a thud, looked up, and saw that she had struck him. And he was pronounced dead at the scene.
Well, that is certainly a very somber reminder to all of us to keep our focus on the roads and away from our devices when we're driving. What exactly is this young woman being charged with?
4 charges, and they've all been filed in Preston Magistrate Court. There's involuntary manslaughter, reckless driving, negligent homicide, and using an electronic communications device without handheld features.
So, Kathy, we are obviously a long ways away, and the cogs of the criminal justice system move slowly before we ever get to sentencing. But what kind of penalties do those charges carry with them if she is found guilty?
A few of them carry possible jail time of a year, up to a year, and all of them carry possible fines. The magistrate could choose to impose those consecutively, meaning if she were found guilty of more than one, the jail time would be served one would from start to finish and then another start to finish, or he or she could implement it concurrently, meaning that the time is all served at the same time. But again, that's something that we're some distance away from in the criminal justice system.
Right, that certainly remains to be seen. Now, the cyclist, was he doing this for transportation, for exercise, recreation? Are we aware of what his motivations were there?
I am not, and I have reached out to some friends and family of his, but obviously they're going through a very difficult time right now, and probably the last thing on their mind is talking to the press, and we certainly won't impose on them. However, there aren't many areas in Preston County for recreational bicycling. There are no rail trails in that particular area of the county that I'm aware of. He may have just been out for some exercise.
As you just alluded to, there's still plenty of questions, plenty of information to be learned in this situation. And Kathy, I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again on this particular case. Thank you so much again for calling in today. Back in November, the Morgantown City Council began to discuss a proposal to reduce penalties for marijuana possession within city limits. On Tuesday evening, amongst other important business, that proposal became a reality. I'm joined now by Dominion Post reporter Ben Connolly. Ben, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Ben, we have a lot to cover here from the Morgantown City Council meeting on Tuesday evening. Obviously, the thing that has attracted the most attention is the passing of this new cannabis ordinance. Can you remind our listeners real quick what exactly that law does?
Basically what that does is sets up a new city law which will allow Morgantown police officers exclusively, when they come upon somebody with 15 grams of cannabis or less, they can use this new city law, which will cap the penalty at a $15 fine with no possibility of jail time. And that's opposed to, obviously, state code, which you can get up to, I think, 90 days and a $1,000 fine. And that's a first offense, although oftentimes that gets expunged if you go through all the steps. So this would be a new law that would just give the Morgantown police an option to charge people through municipal court.
You use the word option there, and that's something that caught my eye in your article, the use of the term officer discretion. Can you clarify to us what exactly that discretion is and what that means?
Well, basically what it means is the Morgantown police, while this new law is on the books now in the city, the Morgantown police are under no obligation to use it. It will be up to the individual officer, taken in the totality of the circumstances, whether they use this or whether they use state code as it currently exists. And that was something that came up during this process when it felt as if, some members of council maybe thought that once this was passed, then Morgantown police would always use this. Police Chief Ed Preston was really adamant in his defense of officer discretion, going so far as to say that no, he would be willing to resign, basically, if they said the police were forced to use this city code.
Okay, and just to clarify, I know we've discussed this on the show previously, but you keep referring to city officers because that is one of 4 law enforcement organizations that's active in Morgantown, including the state police, the county sheriff's office, as well as WVU. And none of them are affected by this law. They will still be following state statute, correct?
Right. All 3 of those agencies are arms of the state. They don't have any choice in the matter. If they arrest somebody with cannabis, it's going to be state code that they follow, which is one of the reasons WVU has spoken out against the city doing this purely out of fear of the confusion that it is going to maybe cause among the students who read this or see this and feel like, okay, a $15 fine, that's not that big a deal. But, the WVU police won't have the option to give you a $15 fine. You'll get charged under state code.
Mm-hmm. We also know, as you mentioned, this has been contentious, and one of the major reasons that the city council brought this up in the first place is because they wanted to spark this type of conversation about cannabis prohibition. Now that the law has passed, have we seen any activity, any conversation? Have we heard anything from anywhere else in the state? I know that the state legislature, for example, is currently in session.
Right, and that's one of the issues that came up during the meeting, and members of council said if this is the kind of thing you support, then one of the local delegates, Evan Hansen, has put forward a bill that I believe is aimed at decriminalization, because that was really kind of the crux of this. I don't know that, while a lot of people feel that the penalties are unfair and they feel like maybe the enforcement is unfair, the actual takeaway of this is still very much up in the air. The Morgantown police, they may not use it. Mm-hmm. I think the main thrust of it was to start that conversation. And I think that's why the city council voted twice, unanimously to pass it, despite the fact that WVU, who is obviously a huge player in Morgantown, is opposed to it.
So we'll obviously keep you informed as the repercussions of this new law ripple out. Moving on real quick, there was other business on Tuesday evening. Most interestingly, or most impactfully, Morgantown City Council is hoping to install sharps containers, needle boxes at, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, 3 locations around town?
Right, 3 public locations.
And you've been following this story, I think, at least since the beginning of the year, if not since the end of last year. What is the update on that topic?
Well, the update is it's going to take at least probably till April to see any of those boxes put in the various locations. This is something that I think people felt was a slam dunk, but you always find out when you're dealing with government of any level that things are not going to happen as quickly as maybe you would like. The city manager last night said there were a few things that were holding it up now. Health Right, which is who's paying for the boxes and who will maintain the boxes. They have to have site-specific insurance policies for each of the locations. They also have to publish. They have to have a 45-day publication window where they make the information about the location of the boxes and I think how the boxes will be maintained public through this newspaper. So that's kind of what's going on with it. This came up in October. I mean, I think probably a lot of people felt like they would be in place by the end of the year.
Yeah, how hard is it to put a couple boxes
Right.
on a wall downtown?
But I think when you're dealing with potentially hazardous material and it's going to be, unsupervised in public locations like along the rail trail, I think there's just more red tape than people anticipated.
We're certainly not advocating in any way for anyone to treat medical waste flippantly, which is what this essentially is medical waste. We know that there's been opposition. There's also been a lot of support in town. I don't know. For me, it's heartening to hear that they're taking the time to do it right. Just remind us one more time, when is it that we'll actually most likely be seeing the boxes go up?
Last night, the city manager said he would put the timeline for the placement of the boxes in April.
Okay.
So
Tuesday evening, there was also some discussion of the ongoing improvements to the riverfront. What was the big takeaway there?
The takeaway was City Council voted to give the city manager the authority to approve a change order to the work being done down there that would add a $221,000 facility for kayak rental, and that would be at the Walnut Street Landing portion of the riverfront project. Obviously, they want to do this while the construction is underway. You don't want to have all that work done and then go down there and tear it up and build a building. Council did give the approval last night. This was after a couple weeks back when this subject first came up. They were asking for between $300,000 and $400,000, and there wasn't a lot of information, and council was a little bit hesitant to do that. But I think as they've brought forward more information as far as the size of the building and how it'll be used, they felt a little bit more comfortable and decided to go ahead and do that.
Well, that's certainly exciting. It'll be rentable, right? That new structure that's the idea. It'll be able to be rented out for activities and events.
Well, I think when they refer to rent, what they're talking about is the city will build the building and then they'll contract with somebody like Adventure West Virginia to actually come in and run the rental facility.
I see.
So they will pay the city rent to rent their kayaks or however that'll work. Basically, the city manager said through their anticipated rental schedule that they plan to set up, it'll take the city about 7.5 years to pay that facility off. So basically what the city's doing is giving itself a loan out of its capital escrow account, and then it'll put that money back over time as through the rental fees.
And finally, in our comprehensive recap of Tuesday evening's city council meeting, we have an update on the firefighters' lawsuit, which has been going on for a while now. Please remind us quickly, what is the issue that the firefighters have with the city?
And this is something that's happened in a number of cities across West Virginia. The firefighters feel as if the way they're being compensated for holidays is not adequate. And basically their argument is we work 24-hour shifts. So if we're going to receive holiday pay, it should be for 24 hours. Or if we're going to receive time off, we should receive 24 hours off. The city was providing, I believe, 12 hours of compensation or time off. And during Tuesday's meeting, council agreed and approved a resolution that would increase that to 24 hours for each of the 14 civil service holidays.
But this does not resolve the larger lawsuit, correct?
It doesn't, because for two reasons. One, this is for 2020, and that's the end of it. Now they can come back and extend it. But what the resolution they passed last night only extends to the end of 2020, and it also makes no mention of all of the back pay that the firefighters are seeking. So that lawsuit will remain in effect until those issues are agreed upon.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for updating us on these important issues going on in our city, and we look forward to your continued coverage on all these topics.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this week's episode. The links to all the stories we discuss are also in the description of this episode on your podcasting app. If you haven't already, subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We would also really appreciate it if you would take the time to rate and review us. Nobody's exactly sure why, but a rate and a review combo really goes a long way to boost the show. Be sure to check out our sports podcast, Best of 7, You can also check out our local history podcast, All About History. The first episode is currently up, and the second is coming out as soon as I get around to editing it. We want to hear from you. Do you like the show? Do you hate the sound of my voice? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Let me know. Email podcast@dominionpost.com. Or you can reach out on any of the Dominion Post social media. We're Dominion Post, WV, on Twitter, Dominion Post _WV on Instagram, or go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Dominion Post WV. Tweet directly at me if you like. I'm at Schultz Reports on Twitter. That's SCHULZ. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you back here next week.